Welcome to the Success in Africa podcast with Dr. Modupe, your weekly dose of leadership vitamins to make you successful in Africa.
Hello and welcome to the Success in Africa podcast, episode 26. My name is Dr. Modupe Taylor Pierce, and I am a scholar and practitioner of leadership and organizational development. Simply put, I study what makes people successful. I have been studying this for 3 decades now with a particular focus on people in Africa. And in this podcast, I will share stories, lessons, and insights about people having success in Africa. Why this podcast? Because I am sick and tired of Africa being the poorest continent in the world. We are blessed with the world's most valuable resource, that is young people. Africa will soon have the largest number of working age people in the world. And when these people achieve success, watch out. Africa's wealth will be unparalleled. Why? Because I don't know of too many Africans whose goal in life it is to die poor. You see, success in life is simply the achievement of a predetermined goal. Whether that goal is creating employment for 1,000 people or transforming your country into a high-income country, this podcast has been created for you, to help you to achieve it. So if you're serious about achieving success in Africa, I want you to subscribe to this channel. If you like this video after you've watched it, please click the like button. This podcast is brought to you courtesy of BCA Leadership, the largest leadership enhancement company in Africa. If you have questions that you want me to answer after watching this video, just log on to BCA Online, the link is on the screen, and post your questions there. That is where I will respond to your questions. In today's podcast, I'm going to be answering some of the questions that have been posed by you, our listeners, to this podcast. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you who listen to this podcast and provide feedback and questions about it. Your questions, your comments, they help me to understand that we are making a positive impact on your lives. And it frankly just gives me the fuel to continue. I also want to say thank you to our sponsors, many of whom prefer to remain anonymous, who have generously supported the creation and production of this podcast. We could not do this without you. Those of you who are regular listeners of this podcast will recall that I have promised that every 3 months or 13th episode, I will focus on answering questions that you have asked during the previous 3 months. Today is the 26th episode, so it is time for me to, frankly, deliver on my commitments, to keep my promises. And I'm going to respond to some of your questions. There are 2 questions that I'm going to focus on, again, because of time. The first one comes from Moses, who asks, and I quote, "In business or some personal goals, is it bad to at least walk alone first and then team up with people later? Especially after you may have had a foundation. So by then, teaming up with people will now be an addition rather than others seeing it as if it was those partners that made you grow." Because some people and some partners are actually like that. Some want to come in when you're at the initial stage and show the world that they are the principal idea owners and steal your shine. This has been a thought actually for whenever I hear walking alone versus walking with a team. Please help me clear my mind on this. Okay, this is what Moses said, word for word. So, to respond to that, what I want you to know, Moses, and for all of our listeners, is that in raising a company, a business, it does take a village. Those of you who listen to previous podcasts have heard me say that. Now, it's just like raising a child. Do you want to have your village ready from the time that you are pregnant with the child? Or do you want to wait until the child is 5 years old before you recruit your village? Well, the obvious answer is that it's better to have had the village prepped from the time that you're pregnant, because there may be issues during pregnancy. There may be issues during the first 10 days. There may be support that is needed so that that child can truly grow up healthy. The same is true with a business. It is much better to have recruited your village when the business is in its embryonic stage, whether it's a business or an organization. Have that team together so that it can grow up as healthily as possible. Now, having said that, if you are in a stage where your business is already 2 years old, 3 years old, 5 years old, does it mean, and let's say you did not recruit a village, does it mean that it's too late for you? No. Again, just like a child who may not have had that village, for example, an orphan in an orphanage, if you then adopt that orphan at 6 years old, as soon as you can, recruit the village so that that orphan would have the best opportunity to grow up into a functioning, productive adult. And the same is true with a business. Wherever you are in the business, if you have not already recruited your village, that is your board of directors, your advisors, your coach, then do so now. It is never too late, and the best time to do it is from the start. Now, I want to address one more thing about Moses' question, because I could sense in there that there was a question of who gets the credit. Moses, and I'll say this for everybody, when you want to build something that will outlive and outlast you, one of the important perspectives and viewpoints that you as the founder need to have is the viewpoint that it's not about you. It's not about who gets the credit. It's about creating something that is bigger than you. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to have people to invest their time and talent into that vision. And if they become convinced that this is just about you and feeding your ego, then they may not be as keen on supporting that vision. So let's move on swiftly then to the next question, which comes from a young man named Joseph. And he asks, he says, I am a young man from a poor home with only secondary school education. What do I need to do to be successful? Thank you so much, Joseph, for asking this question and frankly for having the courage to ask this question. I chose this question because it excited me, because it is for people just like Joseph, the millions of African youth that we have that may feel that what they have is not sufficient in order to be successful. It is for you that we created this podcast. You are one of the target demographics that we have in mind. Now, if you are somebody who has had more education, you can still benefit from this podcast. But I want to address Joseph directly. Here's the thing. If you want to be successful, what I recommend is go back to episode 1 of this podcast. Watch it. Watch every single episode from episode 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, because I have structured this podcast in order to give you the tools and the tips that you need so that when you follow them, you will be successful in Africa. And that does not just apply to Joseph, that applies to every single person who wants to be successful in Africa. For some of you, some of the episodes may be just revision. Some of them may be things that you say, well, I already knew this. But if for you it is new or you have not been doing it, then please go ahead and do it. But let me summarize for you, Joseph, 3 things that I think you will be able to keep in mind and follow. And these are 3 characteristics that I found that every single successful person in Africa has in common. And they are, number one, reliability. Number two, capability. Number three, long-term vision. Not in any order of importance, but they are all important and critical. So, by reliability, I mean the people who have been successful are people who have been consistently reliable. Their word is their bond. They have integrity. They are trustworthy. They can be depended upon. When they say that they will deliver on something or they will do something, you can bet your money on it. If for some reason they are not able to deliver at the time that they promised, they take the proactive measure to call or notify you ahead of time so that you can adjust your expectations. This is one of the key aspects of being successful. Why? Because at the end of the day, if you want to be successful, that usually means that you're going to try to do something that requires resources that you do not have control over. And if you don't have control over that, means you have to influence other people to entrust those resources into your vision or your control. For that to happen, you will have to be somebody who is proven to be consistently reliable. It is not enough to be reliable 60% of the time, 80% of the time. You need to make it your business to be 100% of the time reliable. Second of the three characteristics is capability. To be successful, you have to be a lifelong learner. You have to be someone who takes the initiative to be learning skills that are necessary, that are important, that are relevant to your vision. And that's where capability comes from. The beauty about learning today is that you don't have to go to formal school. You don't have to go to university. You have resources available to you. As long as you have a smartphone and you have an internet connection, you can learn whatever you want to learn. There are free resources online. You've got Dr. Google, as I call Google. You've got Dr. YouTube, as I call YouTube. You can go on Coursera, Allison, Udemy. There are places for you to learn. In today's world, you have access to teachers who may not even be in your country, and you can learn. But make the decision to learn or not to learn is up to you. Even if you come from a poor family, as long as you have a smartphone and an internet connection, which nowadays almost every African has access to, then you can make yourself somebody who is capable. Don't ever buy into the myth that, oh, you're too old to learn. Oh, you didn't have the prerequisites to learn. You can learn anything, and it starts with the belief. And why is that so important? Because if you want to be successful, people have to believe that you are going to be a responsible steward of the resources. And that it goes further than just being reliable, but you have to know and have the skills. So that's the second of three things. The third characteristic for you to be successful in Africa is to be somebody of long-term vision. In other words, you are somebody who knows where they want to be, you want to be in 10 years, you have written it down. Because when you do that, it focuses your mind and it influences your choices. Many of us, many Africans, they shortchange themselves of success. They lose out on being successful because they focus on getting short-term rewards. And those short-term rewards usually come at the expense of long-term success. So if you go for the short-term rewards, you will usually not be successful because it comes at the expense of long-term success. Whether it is building a business, creating a big church, transforming your country, you have to be willing to take some short-term pain and sacrifice in order to achieve the long-term vision. This is the case for everybody that is successful. So be a person of long-term vision, because when you are that way, then you will willingly make the sacrifices in the short term to achieve what you need to achieve in the long term. So remember these three things. Number one, reliability. Number two, capability. Number three, long-term vision. These are three characteristics of all successful people in Africa. I hope I've answered your question properly, Joseph. Just remember, again, go back to episode 1, watch every single episode of this podcast. We have designed it to help you and millions of other Africans to be able to chart their way to being successful in Africa. And it is my hope and my prayer that as you watch it, as you learn, and as you apply these principles, that you will be successful in Africa. This brings us to the end of our podcast today and the end of our series in the second quarter. In the next month, we're going to restart on organizations, focusing a little bit more now on corporate governance, on governance structures. We talked about, in answering the question, the importance of the village, and we will explore some people who have leveraged governance structures to build businesses, to enhance organizations. I hope you will join me next week. Please click the like button if you like this video and tell somebody else about it, because together we can transform our beloved continent of Africa. See you next week.
Tomorrow belongs to those people who prepare for it today. See you next week.